Welcome, everybody. If you would put your name and where you're zooming in from and your pronouns, if you like, put them in the chat. Appreciate it. I'm Mary Ruth Gross. I'm the legislative chair, and I really just want to welcome all of you. It's a great day to be indoors learning something. We have a number of people who are either presenting in the main room and or being facilitators for our breakout sessions. So I really want to thank them. We've got me, Valerie Ventre Hunton she's one of our action team chairs. Nick Ratto. Jack Lucero Fleck is part of our bill processing.
Bill policy.
Thank you. Bill Policy Committee. Kathy Carriage is our legislative visit chair. Laura Niche, our executive director and action team lead for clean energy. Carol Weed is part of our eliminating fossil fuels team, and Lisa Chang from our beloved 350 Contra Costa. We'll get started in just a minute. I think we were still getting people arriving. And Laura will walk us through the next slide. Laura Niche is going to present the overview of who we are and how we all fit together.
Okay, Nick, let's do it since we're recording this so we don't have a bunch of weird gaps. So many of you are here. I recognize your names and are familiar with our organization, but a quick overview. We have two sides of our organization, a straight up 501c3, which is 350 Bay Area. And on that side of the organization, we have a limited amount of lobbying we can do per the IRS rules. And then we have this group, the 350 Bay Area Action Team. And those two sides of our organizations have shared goals, which are delineated in our platform that the leadership team put together. But the summary is we're pushing for 100% clean energy, just transportation, clean air, and clean buildings. Basically, we're working hard to end the fossil fuel era. And on the 350 Bay Area side, we're very policy focused, and that expertise goes throughout the whole organization on both sides and into our local groups. With working specifically on those categories of clean air, we have a number of exciting campaigns going on, which you can learn about if you're following the email newsletters that we send out. And we also have a mobilizing team that helps people do actions in a shared environment, and that is a youth-led group, and they work hard to support all of the other efforts from the policy teams. And on the action side, there's the legislative committee, which gets bills passed, and that's what we're here today, is talk about how we do that. We have 3 action teams: the Eliminate Fossil Fuels team, the Clean Energy team, and the Transportation team. We also have a federal group, which is struggling right now, and a communications team. And recently we have built a powerful electoral accountability team where we do endorsements and then track the progress of the people that we've elected and other climate champions in office. During the election season, we have a Get Out the Vote team as well. Next slide. Specifically into the Bay Area Action legislative work, we have things that we're doing kind of all at the same time to basically build our relationships and get good policies passed and bad policies blocked. So we build relationships with legislators. We meet with them on an ongoing basis so they know who we are. We provide education to offset some of the industry talking points. We have a lot of oligarchs working in not just in Washington, D.C., but in Sacramento as well. And our voices together have to offset that. And we do specific lobbying for specific bills. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. We also educate and mobilize the public and our partners. So we work in coalitions with a bunch of groups. We share information, we collaborate, and we're all trying to get these things passed. Our climate goals are broad, but climate touches everything. So we work with other coalitions that work on things like plastics and, real in the weeds land use issues. We send letters, including letters to the editor, and we create actions like meeting in Sacramento to raise awareness about something and actually boots on the ground, or as I like to say, Birkenstocks on the ground. And then our legislative team does an excellent job going through the unbelievably huge number of bills that are presented and written each year, to ID the ones that are going to move us forward and then track them so these bills can change on a dime. So we need people attached to each individual bill really following what's going on with that. We attend hearings. It's gotten a little bit more difficult now that they're not all on Zoom. And like I said, we work in coalition, we lobby, and we generate new bill ideas to help move our legislators along. So I am going to pass it to, hang on, I lost track. Pass it. Oh, no, I'm not. Next slide. Sorry. So our history, we have a strong history in this group of getting legislation passed. So some of our key wins are getting the SB 100 passed. SB 100 was 100%, setting a goal of 100% clean energy for California. And boy, that was a squeaker, surprisingly. This was a pretty obvious bill to get passed, but everybody who worked on that bill can take full credit for getting it passed, because we even had to pressure the governor to sign it. We were successful a long time ago, is one of our initial things, getting CalPERS and CalSTRS to divest from coal. We're still working on getting them to divest from all fossil fuels. And recently, we passed referendum reform, which was critically important because of the squiggly way that they were writing the propositions. And then the zero emission school bus projects. Thank you, Lisa. And you can read the rest of this there. But we have a say, we have to push really hard, and sometimes it takes multiple years. So sometimes we'll back a bill that we know is not going to pass this session so that we can start those conversations. And then I'm going to pass it back to Mary Ruth to give a little bit more detail about our action teams.
Well, right now, I just want to say, if we really grow our team, we might be able to add another action team. But right now, these are the 3 areas that we focus on. They are really the top areas that could move things significantly. Eliminating fossil fuels, to stop extraction and shipping and processing, exporting, and also eliminating political money in the political influence of oil and gas. And we hold fossil fuel companies responsible. We back legislation that does that. Clean transportation, I forget, Nick could probably tell us what percentage of carbon emissions comes from transportation. So the Clean Transportation Action Team looks at transportation and land use, electrification of transportation, cars, buses, freight, and the charging infrastructure, and public transit, walking paths, friendlier cities for non-fossil fuel means of getting around. And clean energy really addresses state energy policies, aiming for 100% clean energy. It's totally connected with eliminating fossil fuels. And conservation, efficiency, battery storage, microgrids, distributed energy, and energy justice is a really important component of the clean energy work. Next slide. We have a communications team, a small but mighty communications team as well. There's a reason why our action teams are called action teams. We don't just sit around and theorize and keep the information to ourselves. We communicate with our our large database of about 25,000, maybe more people that, and communicate, here's what we want you to do. And we get a pretty good track record of people calling, writing, visiting their legislators. And we do it with social media, with a periodic newsletter, and then action alerts. We can focus, sometimes we'll focus on your assembly person, and you will be in that crowd, and we'll say, call this person, and here's their number, and here's, we can be focused, or we can really be broad. So we take our information from the action teams, and we try to create actions that people can take and move their legislators. I mean, I'm sure the legislative staffs all read our newsletters, but that's not what's going to move them. It's going to be hearing from their constituents. And next, I want to turn this over to Kathy Carriage, our legislative relationships team leader.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming today. This map shows the Bay Area, and this is what we cover as far as legislation is concerned. Each Senate district includes 2 assembly districts. And this area is big. It's 7.8 million people. It's very diverse. We have really dense urban areas, but we also have suburban areas. And for those of you who live in Berkeley and San Francisco, we also actually have a lot of rural areas. And those rural areas sometimes have very different interests than some of the urban ones. So we work in all of these colored sections rather. Now, what I have right now is a question for everybody, and I'm going to try to see if I can get a different view. How many people, give me a thumbs up, know who their state assembly person is? So I'm seeing a lot, but I'm also seeing quite a few who haven't raised it. So I put in the chat, I'm putting it in right now, something that'll help you find your legislator. And this is sort of something that everybody should know. Who is their assembly person? Who is their state senator? And it's something that has changed actually quite recently because we have had redistricting. Okay, the next slide, please. So California has a legislature that sort of has a 2-year session. We have 40 senators. They have about the largest constituency of any state legislature in the United States.
We can't see this slide, by the way. It's not showing.
Oh,
It is showing just fine for me.
Okay.
You have to hit your meeting screen.
Okay.
It's okay.
okay. So they have 4-year terms. We have 80 assembly members, as I mentioned before. We have 2 assembly members for every senator. And they have 2-year terms. There's also a lifetime term limit. So you can't serve more than 12 years in the legislature, which can sort of create knowledge gaps. And that's why it's also very important that the staff is involved, because often the staff carries over from one legislator to another legislator. So you may be talking to the same staff person, even though they're representing different legislatures, which is what happened to me. We have a new senator, but his district office, there's the same person there. So it's important to know the staff too. Given how huge these districts are, grassroots information is very important. We don't want our senators and assembly people to be hearing strictly from the paid lobbyists in Sacramento, who often have very different interests than we do. Okay, go ahead, next slide. Hold on, I'm trying to get my notes up. So the legislature meets throughout the years. The 2024 bills were introduced in 2024. There were over 2,000. There were over 2,500 bills introduced in 2023. So that's an incredible number of bills that these legislators have to look at. And one way that we're very useful is that we can help pinpoint bills that we think are of vital importance. Democrats have supermajorities in both houses. So you can see there we have 60 Democrats in the Assembly, 30 Democrats in the Senate. But that does not mean that everything we pass or all climate legislation is a slam dunk. Democrats don't vote as a block. We have a lot of moderate Dems or conservative Dems. Sometimes I nickname them biz Dems. And every session, there are new legislators that we get to know. As I mentioned before, I have a new state senator. We have a couple new state senators in the Contra Costa. So it changes. Even when we know people are very supportive, we still like to meet with them because we can give them information about a bill that maybe hasn't been on their radar that we think is important. We can find out what questions they have about that. We can relay that to the main sponsors of the bill and they can answer them. We can find out where we can help and we can let them know that we are supporting them if they've got bills that they're working. When we meet with moderates, we're really meeting with them to show that there are people in their districts who support a lot of legislation on climate action, on climate change. And we also meet with conservatives to educate them and to highlight interests, to let them know, yeah, they do have constituents who are interested in this. So it's very important when we meet with legislatures that we know who they are, what motivates them, and how we want to appeal to them. The next couple of slides show first, let's go to the next slide. These are all the state assembly members that are in the area that we cover. So you can see we've got a lot. And some of them we have much more active teams than with others. So if you live in one of these districts, I'm looking for people in some of these districts to meet with their assembly person. One thing to note is we do have the lists here of who committee chairs are, and those are particularly powerful legislators because, as you're going to find out, bills have to go through several committees before they can be voted on the floor. And they can die in every committee they go through. And the appropriations is a particularly powerful committee. Okay, next slide. These are our senators. And the Senate and Assembly districts have changed. So you may be in a different district now than you were in 5 years ago, because after the 2020 census, there was a California Citizens Redistricting Committee that redrew all of these districts. And all the changes are now final. For a while, there were sort of some districts, some areas that were almost, it was very confusing. They were almost like in 2 districts. But now all of those changes have been implemented. And again, take a look, if one of these people is your state senator and you're interested in meeting with them, please let me know and I will make sure you get contacted. Next slide. Oh, wait a minute, So the next slide, Valerie. Valerie is going to talk more about the legislative session and sort of the process. So Valerie.
Thank you. Thanks, Kathy. So we've talked about who makes the laws, the legislators. Now we're going to talk about how the laws are made, or I'm going to say this is the way the laws are supposed to be made. So the legislature runs in 2-year sessions, and new sessions start in odd numbered years. So this is the first year of a brand new 2-year session, which is helpful. The reason you need to know the session a bill is introduced in is because they recycle bill numbers. So SB 222 introduced in 2025 is not the same SB 222 that was introduced in the 223-224 session. Just point of interest. Bills can be, oh, the other thing about the legislature is each year it differs in length. So the first year is slightly longer. The second year is shorter because that's when elections are held and they give the legislators time to go back home and run their election campaigns. Bills can be introduced in either house, and new bills can be introduced in either year one or year two. The advantage of introducing a bill in the first year is if it doesn't pass, it can be held over. There are such things as two-year bills, which we will talk about more, but just keep that in mind. That can be a real strategy for a bill that's difficult, or you think they're going to need more education. A legislator might actually introduce a bill early or in the first year, knowing it will be held over. Bills introduced in year two, they either pass or die, and bills must pass through both the Senate and Assembly before going to the governor. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a really, really fast overview of the bill passage process. And then, by the way, what we're talking about here are what are called policy bills, not budget bills. The budget process is entirely separate. It's similar, but we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about policy bills. Okay, so as mentioned, a bill can be introduced in either house. And ideas, by the way, for bills can come from anywhere. And legislators they actively solicit ideas from their constituents. Once a bill is introduced, no action can be taken on it for 30 days. Now, this is helpful for groups like ours because, as I mentioned, we've been mentioning, you find a bill, you think it's interesting. Well, this is your time to start researching it. This is your time to find out who is the author, what is some background, who are the other groups who might be opposing it. After 30 days, bills are referred to the Rules Committee, and the Rules Committee then decides which policy committees the bill is assigned to. The Senate has a set of policy committees and the Assembly. So some Senate policy committees are environmental quality, natural resources, and water. Assembly has environmental safety and toxic materials. No, the names differ from in each house, so you got to look them up, but that's all right. We have lists for you. Bills can be referred to more than one committee. Once a bill is referred, it will be scheduled for a hearing. And this is the important time because the minute a bill is scheduled for a hearing, that sets up a time clock where if we want to endorse a bill or oppose a bill, this is the time when we act, often in coalition with other groups, to submit letters of support or opposition. And as Kathy mentioned, we often have to convince chairs. A chair can hold up a bill. A chair can decide a bill will not even be heard in the committee and it dies. So as mentioned, the period before the hearing date is very active. And working in coalition, we don't work alone. We're a well-regarded organization, but we're a local organization. And when you're trying to pass a bill, you need to work with people who are throughout the state. So we work with a lot of environmental justice groups, other climate organizations, and not necessarily just environmental organizations, because if the goal is to pass or oppose a bill, you build those networks. And that's part, by the way, of the tracking that you might be doing. So on the day of the hearing, groups supporting and opposing the bill meet in Sacramento. They'll choose a few key people to speak. And once those key witnesses finish, there is an opportunity for public comment. Unfortunately, nowadays, all that public comment has to be in Sacramento. And once again, some of our bill trackers have gone to Sacramento and spoken up. And by the way, when you are in the hearing, if you're not one of the special speakers, all you have to say is, I'm Valerie Ventry Hutton. I'm with 350 Bay Area Action, and I support or oppose the bill. That's it. But it's important to have numbers. If the bill passes the policy committees, it's going to go to these, it will likely go to a Senate or Assembly Appropriations Committee. Oops, excuse me. Appropriations, as Kathy Carriage mentioned, is a very powerful committee. It's a sorting, it's like, I'm sorry, if people like Harry Potter, it's like a sorting hat. Bills either go there to pass or die. And the thing about appropriations is they have a very special process called the suspense process. That suspense process is intended to allow all bills who have a fiscal component to be heard at once. So it sounds great, but it's also an opportunity. All this is done without public scrutiny. It's done behind closed doors. So it's a very Byzantine process, and you don't always know why a bill has died in appropriations or why it's even passed. If a bill gets through all the committees, it will be referred to the floor of the House in which it's introduced for a vote. And once a bill passes its first house, which is called the House of Origin, it goes through all the same steps in the second house. So I'm not going to go through them, but it's exactly the same steps. Once it passes, if it gets voted on in the second house, and let's say it passes, if it's significantly amended in that second house, it goes back to the first, where they debate whether or not they're going to agree with those amendments. If they don't agree with the amendments, they have a committee from both houses that meet. It's called a concurrence, and then they decide whether the bill passes or not. Once it passes both the chambers, it's sent to the governor's desk, and he signs or vetoes it. There we go. Next slide, please. So that's the process. And the question you may have, well, the question I have is, okay, that's nice. When do I do these things? We base a lot of our work on the legislative timeline. Those are your guidelines. Those are your guardrails. And there are critical deadlines set every year that determine whether, whether a bill moves forward or whether it's dead. And we're coming up to a very big deadline in February 21st. That's when all new bills must be introduced. If someone has a great idea after that date, there are ways around it, but by that, you're going to have to wait till next year. June 6th, bills must pass through their first House of Origin. And by September 12th, bills must pass through both houses. And along this journey, we base a lot of our actions on the timeline set by the legislator. So letters are going to be due at a certain time. They're going to have public hearings. A lot of lobby days are scheduled for May because that's before the big vote and before the bills have to pass out of their House of Origin in early June. So this is your guide to when you have to do things, not necessarily what you have to do. Next slide, please. We talked about the fact that the bills, once a bill passes through both houses, it goes to the governor's office. The governor either vetoes the bill, he signs the bill, or if he doesn't sign the bill still becomes law. So that's one of the big things the governor's office do. But perhaps from our perspective, one of the most important things the governor's office does, other than propose the state budget, is he directs all state agencies, and there are over 200 agencies and departments in the state of California. Next slide, please. Some of these, the legislative committee does not do a lot of work with regulatory agencies. That's a 350 Bay Area side. However, we still get involved and we still sometimes track and write letters of support or opposition. State agencies implement and enforce laws. They write the rules that turns a bill into a law that can be enacted, that can be put into action. Some of the agencies we deal mostly with are California Air Resources Board, Public Utilities Commission, Energy Commission, CalGEM, which is part of the California Natural Resources Agencies, which sets issues drilling permits for oil and gas wells. The issue here is staff in regulatory agencies aren't elected. So even though we can offer comment and try to urge them to take a certain action, it's harder. And that's why certain groups will focus more on the governor's office, because the governor is subject to constituent impact. So next, please. We're now, oh, Mary Ruth, is it time for a stretch break?
Whoa. I lost my running show. Okay. Yeah, well, yes. Stretch break for 3 minutes.
Go back one.
No, we're going back up to slide 19. We haven't gone.
There we go.
Okay, we're getting ready to go to our first breakout room, and in the breakout rooms, you're going to have an opportunity to be introduced to some tools we use for tracking and understanding a bill, and you're going to be doing research on a legislator, because in breakout room 2, you're going to create an agenda tailored to that legislator. It's much easier to have points of focus, having a bill and who you're going to talk to. Because while you can be generic, it always helps if you know something about the legislator and how you can position a bill to maybe try and hopefully try and influence them. So the bill we're going to focus on is going to be called the Polluters Pay Climate Superfund Bill. It hasn't been introduced this year, but we believe it's going to be introduced this week. And we have a background paper that we're going to be sharing. However, even though we don't have the actual wording for the new bill, it's going to be modeled very, very closely on SB 1497, which was introduced last year but didn't pass. So we're going to be using SB 1497 as a surrogate for some of our research. It'll be very helpful too, because you'll see how different legislators, if there's still a legislator this year, you'll see how they voted. You'll get a lot of good information. Now, some background on SB 1497 to give you context. The Polluters Pay Climate Superfund, both Vermont and New York have passed similar legislation. Other states are looking at it. And somebody actually told me that Patagonia, the company, is highlighting Polluters Pay Superfund bills as part of their action. Fascinating. The Polluters Pay Climate Superfund would assess a fee on the largest greenhouse gas emitters, and it would require them to pay their fair share of the damage that has been caused historically by their products. So it tries to shift the burden from the California taxpayer to the polluters who created the problem. And the bill, by the way, focuses on fossil fuel companies. The bill will direct the California Environmental Protection Agency, Cal EPA, to complete a cost study to quantify total past damages to the state caused by fossil fuel emissions. So they can calculate damages, and then it directs Cal EPA to identify the responsible parties and assess a fee on the largest polluters proportional to what they emitted. So you assess costs, and you have the polluters, what percentage of the damage did they cause, and you assess fees accordingly. The fees collected will fund critical climate solutions. So that's where we are, and I think we're ready to go into our breakout rooms.
And we're running a little tiny bit late, so I think we don't have time to answer too many, any more questions at this point. So over to Kathy. carriage. Kathy,
She's muted.
we can't hear you.
There
Kathy.
we see her, but we can't hear her yet.
Right, you're muted, Kathy.
She's talking.
Yes, I see that.
Okay.
I can't read lips. Oh, no. Kathy, you're muted. You know, okay.
Okay,
Yay.
So,
okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Great. So I know I was just talking with my group a little bit about money in politics. And, we meet with our legislatures. Mostly we meet at this point in time on Zoom. And or sometimes you can meet in person with staff in the district offices. But sometimes I think it's better almost to meet by Zoom and meet with the Sacramento staff because often they know more. But we're a grassroots group. That's our benefit, that we're this grassroots group and we are able to really let them talk to their constituents. We're never going to be able to match big industry and money. And the money can go in a lot of different forms. And, an example is that when we were working on one of our recent campaigns, the oil industry spent like $31 million on lobbying and campaigns. The California Democratic Party considered a no fossil fuel money pledge in 2021, but did not act on that. And it can be very difficult to find out where all the money is coming from. But you sort of want to see who is funding your legislature so you know how to, process them. And you can get information from the Secretary of State on what PACs might be supporting different candidates. And I showed my group a couple of, we have the information about the Sierra Club and another organization that was working to track the money. Next slide. So this is a couple of screenshots of meetings with our legislators, and sometimes we're meeting with the legislators, sometimes we're meeting with the staff. During all the pandemic, it was all online, but it's sort of migrated a little bit over to that now, pre-pandemic. Next slide. So there are a lot of different ways that we support bills. Now, when you're meeting with your legislator, I try to have a legislative lead in each district set up and coordinate the meeting. But our action teams also keep in touch with the bill sponsors and the author's office about information on bill status, whether it's changed, whether there have been amendments. Sometimes they'll amend a bill sort of so that we don't want to support it anymore. And then we set up meetings with staff. I'd like to have a lead do that. We work with partners in a lot of different groups, and often some of those people will come to those meetings. In swing districts, in addition to meeting with the legislators is only one part. We will generate calls, petitions, letters, postcards. We have a huge mailing list. And we can target that to individual legislative districts. So if we've got 5 people who have committed to voting for the bill, there's no reason to generate postcards for them or phone calls. But we do want to generate postcards and phone calls to that one legislator who is swinging, who hasn't decided. The meetings are often on short notice, so I'd like to have a lot of people who I can call in because we like to have a variety of people. Another way we said is attending hearings. Now, as Valerie said, often that's just, yes, 350 Bay Area supports this. We used to be able to do that remotely. I'm not sure what'll happen this year. Last year, we had to go in person for a lot of things. Okay, next slide. When we organize meetings and have people come, we're trying to build relationships with the legislators. So often we'll set up an introductory meeting just to let them know who we are and to know the types of things we're working on. We 350 can organize meetings on specific bills. Lots of times when we meet with legislators, we'll talk about 3 or 4 bills, and that's about all you can do if you're in a half-hour meeting. So the legislative policy team determines what are our priority bills, what are we going to talk about. We often will attend town halls, and we try to keep people informed about those. So if you're in a district and you see a town hall, I'll usually email our key people. And that's a good way to go to these town halls and bring up questions about the climate, because that lets them know that there are people that are concerned about that. I always thank legislators when we've met with them. We thank them right after the meeting. I sometimes have called up and thanked legislators for specific legislation they voted yes on, particularly if I knew it was a really contested bill. And I send thank you cards to everybody we've met with at the end of the year. This shows some that were sent a long time ago. This year, I sent some that were handmade cards by a local artist. But it's important to build these relationships and to thank people. And sometimes if you're thanking a staff member, sometimes those are very important relationships to build. Okay, next slide. So who should come to the meeting? Well, we want to make sure we have constituents. That's probably the most important people who should come. But sometimes you're going to have a meeting about a very specific bill that is technical, or it's one of the bills you're talking about, and you might want to have a doctor. Physicians for Social Responsibility have come to a lot of meetings when we've had very specific bills about health issues. It's good to get people in faith groups, Democratic leaders, Democratic clubs, labor, youth, students, educators, all those people are important. We had a student come to a meeting last year who got into a discussion a little bit when the meeting was done, really, with the staff, and I think ended up getting an internship. So it's something that can really be helpful. So we'd like to have a diversity of people, and above all, we want to make sure we have constituents. This is a meeting that shows some high school students and a teacher from 350 Sonoma meeting with Senator Mark McGuire. Okay, next slide. Briefly, what happens when we meet with the legislature, we start out, we have an agenda prepared. We assign roles, we give people times. And I prepare 2 agendas, one that we will send to the office and one that we keep for ourselves so that we can refer to it. And that might have more, that's going to have time limits on it, more specific information, pros and cons. But this is all something we do prior to the meeting. And that's what we're going to be working on next. So we're going to be doing an agenda. I think we can go to the next slide. Oops, sorry. So we're going to be working on how to prepare. We'll just look at some tips for how to organize a meeting, the roles people will play during the meeting, and those are always pre-assigned. We'd like to be really organized. Talking points. My group didn't get to do a whole lot of research, but talking points based on that research, how we're going to organize that, and we'll be practicing the talking points in a run through. Are we ready for the breakout groups, or are we going to have a little break here or just go straight to it?
Set a timer for 25 minutes.
Unmute, and then I will find the screen here. Okay. Okay, so now comes the denouement. So we want you to join one of our legislative teams if you're interested. We hope people are. Um, the three teams that were mentioned previously are the three state action teams: eliminate fossil fuels, transportation and land use, and clean energy. Also the communications team, and which was mentioned as well, and a federal team, which right now is somewhat in mourning, but has not. We still have an active federal team because things change and we have to keep track of what's going on. So in general, if anyone is interested, we definitely would like to see people joining up with our action teams with all the support of the team lead and the general group that we have. It's very, supportive, and never have heard any of our team members say that they were kind of left out, to figure things out for themselves. So that's important. So let's see. Okay, so your next steps, I went to the small screen so I can put this in the chat, or maybe somebody can grab this from the screen for me.
I put it in the chat. Yeah,
Can't?
I have put it in the chat.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Laura. All right, let's go back to full screen.
And I put in the DER.
Okay, so two things as far as next steps. As I just mentioned, joining an action team or the comms team. So the link that's now in the chat, but it's also on the screen when you get these slides, if you get them sent to you an email, you can join one of the action teams. That's the second bullet point. The first bullet point here is we have a monthly meeting, the legislative committee, that's open to anyone on a hot topic of interest. And the next monthly meeting is going to be the 23rd, and it's going to be on DER and how to reduce energy costs and meet climate goals. One of 350's more esteemed members, Dr. Claire Bloom, Claire Broom will be talking at that meeting. So there are links to both of those as far as signing up. And hopefully you'll take advantage of that. So back to Mary Ruth.
I think that's it. I just want to
Yeah.
thank everybody for coming. And
Actually, Mary Ruth, can I interrupt for just a second?
absolutely,
One of our members in my breakout group was suggesting that there is this Make Polluters Pay mass call tomorrow. Would it be appropriate to put a link for a registration link for that?
if you have it, yeah, put it in.
I'm having problems getting back and forth from my Zoom, so
Well, Valerie, do you have a link to that call?
Let me see if I can get it.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. I hope it was fun. If you have any feedback, stick it in the chat before we hop off.
Yeah,
yeah, I'd like to thank everyone too. And I hope everyone has filled out the survey with what you'd like to work on.
I just want to say the people who stayed to the end of my, not everybody stayed to the end, but they did an awesome job. They were great. So thank you, everybody who was there.